Now more than ever, people want to know if there's anything they can do to help. And the answer is yes at BioLife Plasma Services. Your plasma is desperately needed to create life-changing medicines to help treat people with immune deficiencies, those who are most at risk right now. When you donate plasma at BioLife, you can earn up to $700 in your first month. Check out our new St. Paul location opening March 20th, or visit biolifeplasma.com to learn more about donating plasma. biolifeplasma.com.
Hey, welcome back to Two Mics. You're on with Colonel Mike and Dr. Michael Stewart. Today we have a very important guest with us. We have the former Undersecretary of Commerce for President Donald Trump, Corey Stewart, live in Virginia. And Corey's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on with the lobbying of AT&T, which is CNN, Time Warner, to broker deals with the Chinese telecom. And he's been in the news the last few days, and he's an international type lawyer. He'll tell us exactly what's going on and who's doing it. And this is the big question. Again, we're back to the establishment, the neocons. You're on with Dr. Michael Stewart, Colonel Mike. Corey Stewart, welcome to Two Mics. This is your first time on. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike. It's great to be on. I was at in the Trump administration as Undersecretary for Industry and Security in the Department of Commerce for President Trump. And while I was there, we were responsible for placing sanctions on entities that were involved in human rights abuses, sanctions against mostly Chinese entities, but also some Russian and other countries as well, involved in, threats to U.S. national security, and as well as other things. But one of the entities that we were about to place, we were in the process of placing on the entity list. This is basically the government's blacklist, the companies that you, as a U.S. company, you can't be dealing with, is China Telecom. Now, China Telecom is just what it sounds like. It's a Chinese government-owned telecommunications company. They operate cell phone service. They do a lot of other telecommunication services, kind of like AT&T is in the United States, or Verizon, et cetera. But the reason we were going to place them on the entity list is because they were using cell phone technology, the cell phone service, and they were using the other telecommunication technologies to track, identify, spy on ethnic minorities, particularly the Uyghur population in Western China, which is a Muslim minority population of about 10 million people in Western China, and also Tibetans and other minorities in China. And what they would do with that information is hand it over to the Chinese government, and with the Chinese government, the Chinese police state would then apprehend these people, place them in what there's no better word for it than a modern day concentration camp. And inside of those concentration camps, there's all kinds of things that are going on, widespread reports of gang rape of the women in there, torture, and potentially executions and other unspeakable acts that I won't go into. But that is why, and China Telecom was helping the Chinese government to do this. So we were going to place them on the entity list, put the sanction on them. That's when we got the telephone call from Ed Gillespie, the executive vice president of AT&T, who called myself and Secretary Ross and begged us not to place China Telecom on the entity list. Why? Because they disputed the human rights abuses? No, not because of that. They didn't want them on there because China Telecom is AT&T's business partner in China, and they were worried that if the United States government placed sanctions on China Telecom, that the Chinese government would retaliate against AT&T and terminate their contract with them. So here
What
you
a-
had
Wow.
AT&T doing the bidding for essentially the Chinese government.
So our listeners, they're pretty diverse intellectual listeners. We have listeners around the globe. Did you hear that? That's AT&T, which is CNN, and CNN is Time Warner. And, you know, a lot of us are leaving Google and YouTube and all this. And maybe you have AT&T, maybe you have Time Warner, maybe you have CNN. These are things you have to consider, especially Christians. We have to consider this. I mean, they're Muslims, okay, but they're still God's people, and they're being tortured, raped, whatever. Mike, what do you have to say?
Well, I think the fact that Gillespie ran for governor of Virginia is a point worth noting too. That he's supposed to be a Republican and concerned with the existence and the survival of the republic. I'm at the point now. There was no easier country on earth to deal with after the fall of the Soviet Union than China, and yet we have pretended that somehow China is not worse than Stalin. It always has been. It is entirely unreliable. Now we're stuck with this dilemma of not just trying to fix the broken economic bilateral trade issue between the two of us, but now we're getting stuck in these issues like Hong Kong and the Uyghurs. Now, both of those are terrible things, but we brought up the Chinese government and the Chinese economy from dirt to be a rival. And now we're acting surprised that they're not nice people. And the idea, when the British abandoned the Hong Kong people in I think 1997, our administration backed that to the hilt. Now, only an idiot in the United States, especially in the elite, only an idiot could believe that the Chinese were going to honor their word for 50 years. So I remember just saying, this is crazy. Why would you trust them? You can't do anything about it. If they renege, you won't go to war over it, and you shouldn't go to war over it. Now, the Uyghurs. I'm sorry.
Mike,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think this guy, Ed Gillespie, also not just ran. I was going to speak to Mr. Stewart about that, about his former career as a politician, but Ed Gillespie was the RNC chairman.
Well, he's on the tape.
He was a Bush guy, too.
Yeah, well. But anyway, the only point I wanted to make is two things. There's nothing we can do about it. They're going to kill as many Uyghurs as they want. The only people who could stop it would be the Saudis and the rest of the Muslim world going in there, sending guns and money to fight the Chinese. Hong Kong was dead on arrival after 1997. There's nothing we can do there. And certainly it's not worth a war. Unfortunately, we're tied at the hip with the Taiwanese. And we'll have to fight because of treaties if that occurs. But it's, at the end of the day, there's not a lot we can do about this if those are the issues we focus on. And it's a roundabout way to get to the point. But my point is the way to get at the Chinese is to damn them economically, drive them right over the cliff economically, because they can't do it without our help. They can't exist.
Mr. Stewart, are there certain, I seen in an article, there's certain companies such as BlackRock International, Vanguard Group, Wells Capital, they're all investors behind this, aren't they?
Well, virtually every American corporation worth its salt is invested in China in some way, shape, or form. And I do agree with the doctor that the way to ultimately, we have to confront this foe, and there's no other way to put it. I mean, you can't look upon China as a partner. They are hell bent on dominating, making the 21st century the Chinese century, and that means getting rid of the United States or pushing us aside or pushing us down or pushing us away, and they're bound and determined to do it. Now, I just think that one of the things that bothers me about these corporations, like AT&T, which is CNN's parent, as they preach morality. They're always talking what we call virtual signaling, talking about how virtuous they are, and then lecturing to us about how we need to change our lives to conform with their morality. When in fact, they are putting profit above human rights. They're putting profit above, over and above U.S. national security interests. They're putting profit over and above the human rights abuses of the minority population in China and elsewhere. So that's why you can't listen to them. And certainly we should not be tolerating in this country when companies like CNN or AT&T or Amazon or Google or Facebook, etc., are trying to limit our speech as Americans because they think that they have a superior morality. That's part of my issue here. Now, to go to the bigger issue about China, yes, I think there are better ways, like the doctor said, to get to the heart of it, to try to weaken China or at least limit their economic power and hence their political and the military power as well. But one of the ways to do that is to sow disruption inside of China and to do it through the repressed minority populations in Western China. China's western borders several of former Soviet republics, most of which are predominantly Muslim. We can work with the Saudis. We should be working with the Saudis and others to allow these people in Western China to defend themselves against the Chinese government. And I do think that bringing small arms through Western China, I think that's something the United States should pursue and in conjunction with its allies.
Doctor?
Well, that's what we did in Afghanistan. And it worked, but we didn't have the common sense to leave after we won, or after the Afghans won. Now, if we get involved in Western China, what's the point of that? What have we got to win there? We can protect some Muslims, fine. I guess that's worth doing, but not at the chance of risking any kind of conflict with the Chinese. I also think that the one way to get the minorities and get Chinese people up in arms against the regime, or at least try to do that, is to make that country suffer economically, drive its economy to the brink of disaster. That's the way to create, I think, some kind of opposition domestically, because I don't think there is a great deal of resentment about the treatment of the Uyghurs anywhere in China. China is a very racist country and always has been, looks down on us as inferior human beings like the Democrats do. So, running guns in there is fine. And it would help. It would kill some Chinese military and Chinese police and officials and that kind of thing. But the retribution against that would be enormous. And how far do you want to get into a tit for tat in a place where there's no railroads or roads? It's very, very difficult, sir.
Let me ask a question of Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, I guess to respond to that, if I could, real quickly. Like I said, I completely agree that the way to sow discord inside of China and to put pressure on the Chinese government and actually essentially to weaken them is to try to undermine them economically. But that's not the only way to sow discord. No. In this country, where was there the greatest discord over the past couple of generations? During Vietnam. And then if you saw at the tail end, one of the factors that led to the collapse, I would argue, of the Soviet Union was the war in Afghanistan. Families having to send, if I could finish, please, send their young men, sending their young men into Afghanistan. They're getting killed, and that circled back around into the Soviet population, sowing discord. I think we should be doing the same thing in China. China gets involved in a civil war in its own borders. It's going to weaken the country.
I would say you're correct. I would just make one point, though. While that's going on, the American business community is going to continue supporting the Chinese and enhancing their capabilities against the Uyghurs, either in detection of them or in some other form. There's no way, I think, to really hurt the Chinese as long as the American business community is siding with the Democrat fascists domestically and supporting our enemies overseas. I don't know how we get how that hole can be plugged. That's got to stop, because we can't challenge them with small arms while the American business community is giving them extraordinary communications and IT capabilities to use against that enemy. That's all I would say, sir.